Hi there, everyone. In this lesson, we're going to complete the third part of Craig Higginson's novel, The Dream House. Do remember to add to your notes on the various themes. Patricia recalls the days and weeks that followed Looksmart's birth. She remembers watching Looksmart's mother wash him like he was a piglet, she says, and treats him with a firm, no-nonsense approach. She wonders if that approach, fearless of the screams, confirmed to his mother that he was strong. Patricia recalls watching the baby, mischievous yet shy, curious and smiling. Her dogs were protective towards her, following when she went to visit the baby. She sensed that his mother resented her frequent visits, and so she slowed them and then stopped visiting the baby altogether. Follow in your novel as Dr. Zwechers reads this section to you.
Patricia, page 132 to 133. The first time she saw Looksmart's mother washing him, she wondered if she should be concerned for him. The mother handled him like he was a piglet, as tough as a piglet, dipping him into the zinc bath and splashing water all over his face. While the infant screamed, almost without pause for breathing, she dried him with a rough grey towel and dressed him. But it also occurred to her that Looksmart's mother might have been gratified by the sound of his screaming. It would have confirmed for her that the boy was strong, and he would need to be strong in the world he was entering. On the 5th day after his birth, the umbilical cord fell off. Looksmart's mother said she would bury the piece of flesh. Whose flesh exactly? In the yard where she grew her vegetables. The baby brought all of them together. Even the dogs would come down to the compound with her every morning after breakfast to see the newborn child. They would walk at her ankles, threatening to trip her up, which they somehow never did, and then lie right against the door of the hut when she went inside. It was impossible to know what the dogs understood about the goings-on inside the hut. But they would whimper and groan and growl at anyone who approached. Patricia never tired of watching the baby. The way he lifted his arms and moved his hands slowly and thought about things. Even when he looked full of mischief, he seemed a bit shy somewhere. He would smile without seeming to understand the meaning of a smile. Patricia once said to his mother that he looked like he was receiving signals from faraway ships. At 3 weeks, he was able to form proper tears. Oh, it was so sad to see him able to cry real tears. It was not long after this that Patricia started to feel the mother's resistance growing towards her. Her visits, which were greeted with a high cry of feigned pleasure, went against the way things were done. So Patricia started to come every second day, then once a week, until it happened that she no longer came at all. She continued to ask about the boy, but he eventually became little more to her than another item on a list. The list of things to be asked about were the workers on the farm. Once or twice afterwards, the mother carried the child up to the big house at her request. Both mother and child dressed up for these visits, looking like they were on their way to church. The child was brought to her like a foal to be inspected, but he was never offered for her to hold. And Patricia never thought to ask for it.
The irony is evident here. This baby is not a uniting factor. The description of Looksmart being presented to Patricia as though he were livestock shows the superficial nature of their relationship. This is affection at best. It's not love. On page 134, Looksmart goes into more detail about that fateful day. He explains how Beauty saw Richard and Grace having intercourse, rape according to Looksmart. Once Grace noticed Beauty, she shrieked and ran. Richard then unleashed the dog, Chloe, which attacked Grace, who was running away, while Richard drove away. According to Looksmart, this constitutes murder. Looksmart's account of the rape, the murder, is shocking. He speaks bluntly. This is the climax of Act 3, as we saw it in the traditional structure of 5-act plays. What of Richard? He's running in the dark and feeling lost and overwhelmed. He notices an even more basic, derelict house and also a slab of concrete. He's lost all sense of time and is oppressed by the concept of timelessness, homelessness, and futility. This is Richard's life. He is rudderless, so far gone that there is no redemption for him. No stars, just mud. It follows the revelation as it is the only reckoning he's ever likely to face, his failed mind. Are you able to put yourself in Patricia's shoes? Can you feel any sympathy for her? In this section, Patricia is puzzled about what Looksmart is expecting. She sees the situation as something staged and she's uncertain of her role. She too is feeling that much of life is futile. It's as if Looksmart is expecting something of her, some response, some reaction. He comes across as melodramatic, threatening that he might have ripped out Richard's heart. Patricia treats Looksmart's version of the past with some doubt. Richard is a bigot. Why would he have had sex with a black woman? She does concede that he hasn't been a faithful husband. Patricia doesn't condemn his affairs. She used them as justification for her own. She then tries to refute his version of the night of Grace's death. It's not a forceful argument, and we have to question whether she even believes herself or if she even really recalls properly what happened. Listen as Dr. Zwechers reads this fairly lengthy passage to you.
Patricia, page 138 to 141. She doesn't know what role Look Smart expects her to play. The outraged landowner, the devastated wife, his mother. She has tried out all these parts during her life and many more. The dutiful daughter, the unhappily married spouse, the dexterous lover, the barren woman, the breeder of Welsh ponies, the invalid, the joker, the nurse. And yet, none of these has ever managed to reach anyone or change anything. She has watched people do what they would have done anyway, whether she interceded or not. In the end, she was left to fall back on herself, alone, in the sitting room, surrounded by dogs that were sleeping their lives away, and were about as effectual as she was. But he is staring at her nonetheless. Full of an expectancy that appears almost optimistic. This is possibly what he came here for, her skepticism. He may have come to doubt his memories and have a skepticism of his own. By refuting her doubts, he will finally be able to banish his. Did you at least question beauty? When? Well, I don't know, Look Smart, before you left. Who would the police believe? Your husband or me? She doesn't try to answer this, knowing no answer is expected. If I'd stayed, I might have killed him. I might have buried my hands deep inside of him and drawn out his heart. He was barely able to look in Richard's direction back then, let alone get anywhere near his heart. But she's not about to say this. I'm sorry, but I find all of this difficult to digest. My husband is far too much of a bigot to fuck a black girl. Evidently not. There was a long line of stable girls from England. She doesn't know exactly how he found them. The back pages of the Horse and Hound. Those days it was easy enough to lure young women mad about horses over from England. They'd all been pretty. Had he insisted they enclose a photograph. And posh. And taking a gap year, generally, she liked to think that most of them resisted his advances, but that never stopped him from making them anyway. It was difficult to believe, but Richard had been a good-looking man once, with his strawberry blonde hair, his neat mouth and his pale blue gaze. He had humour and a sly Yorkshire sensuality. Also, he was adept at flattery, and women, in her experience, could rarely resist flattery when it gave the illusion of being accurate. During their brief courtship, He had managed to divine much of what she had always wanted to hear. The narrative she had told herself and had never had repeated back at her. She was her own person, good at kissing, wise beyond her years. He even claimed to like her bouncy hair and oversized breasts. On occasion, he would suckle her like a baby, while she stroked his hair. The first goal from England had upset her. She didn't mind admitting that. But in the end, it was permitted. It was what permitted her affair. A few years later with John Ford. She was pleased. On the rare occasions, she thought about it now, that her relationship with John endured long after the last of the stable girls had left. She liked to think she had outlasted Richard in this, as in everything else. And she had found more than enough opportunity to punish Richard for his antics. First, she denied him her body, then a bedroom, then a friendship, and finally she denied him her imagination. It was this last retraction that might have been her mistake. For what other acts had he committed during her absence? Well, even if it's true, she hears herself saying, even if he did have sex with her, God knows he might have, he tried to seduce a long line of stable girls from England. Even then, you can't say he set the dog on her. That is just a monstrous thing to say, especially when you don't know the facts. And whose facts are those? Don't you know that she was taunting the dog, throwing stones at it, and that it pulled itself free? She's embellishing, of course. Not so much to defend herself as to test him or break his momentum. Who told you that? Well, Richard did. Looksmart laughs and shakes his head. But what does it matter, whether he believes her now or not? Who's to say what happened on that barely discernible day? Not her, and certainly not Looksmart. Well, and I'm sorry, she continues, but there was nothing at all about going to the dairy to get the bucky. We loaded her straight into the Merc and you drove it away at once. Just now, you couldn't even say I was there. But now you can tell me that. Come now, madam. Surely you can do better than this. As we are speaking, it's all coming back. It is true. The more she speaks her version of events, the clearer they become. Each detail fitting neatly into place. What's to make his account any more accurate than hers? She knows that he's doing exactly what she is doing, making up sentences as he goes along, bridging whatever gaps he encounters as he encounters them. Then you will know that it was me who carried her to the dairy, and all the way back again while you hid in the house. I was securing the dog or trying to find Richard. Doesn't matter what. All I know is I would never have cared about getting blood on my seats. As she says this, she believes it. She has never believed anything as firmly as she believes it. You going to deny even that? But by your own admission, I never even said it. You thought of it. He reels away from her as though everything around him is about to implode. You said we had to take her to the bucky. And when she had to go in your car, you made us to put down blankets. Flea-bitten blankets you reserve for your dogs. Of course you thought it, man. There's always been fighting in this house. Objects thrown about, shouting, recriminations going deep into the night. And although she and Richard haven't fought for some years, mainly because he's become incapable of sustaining a satisfying argument, his rage has not diminished, and neither has hers. There are times when they still shout in each other's direction without any apparent provocation. By raising their voices against the vacancy, they are reminding themselves that they exist and can still feel something. So Patricia is used to shouting. Were they speaking of something else? She might even be partially enjoying this. This exchange with Look Smart reminds her of a world in which things matter, where people still want to be heard, and where there are consequences to their actions. Listen, Look Smart, I really don't know what happened, or why it has to matter now. Why are you wasting time on this, on me, on things that are dead? You have a wife, children, a splendid bloody suit. It is because I want you to understand. What? What I understand.
The language is brutal. Look Smart does not pull any punches. Patricia tries to imply that Richard is too racist to have had sex with a black girl. But rape isn't about sex. It's about power and subjugation. It's difficult to imagine Richard and Patricia as in-love newlyweds or a courting couple. The image evoked in the fifth quote is disturbing. Did Richard want a wife or a mother? Patricia's affair with John Ford makes more sense now, but does this make her infidelity more acceptable? I don't know. Quote 8 seems to be a desperate plea. Is this what Patricia remembers, or what she wants to, what she needs to believe? Quotes 9 and 10 convey the tortured nature of this conversation. Look Smart blames Patricia for what she thought. Is this fair? His frustration here is palpable. What is it that he wants Patricia to understand? And why is he so angry with himself? Beauty runs in this section. She remembers the road along which she is running. She's aware of the rain, heavy as salt. She has a sense of despair. Everything is lost. She feels isolated and can find neither Richard nor Becky. For her, Patricia and Look Smart are like ghosts because they have lost so much to the past and are still so unaware of each other. as if they're surrounded by absolute darkness. The analogy of the road is an important one. Can you use it to show how Beauty's life differed from Grace's life? Beauty sees that these two people are trapped in their pasts, unable to move on. From page 144, we are given some insight into Looksmart's mental turmoil. He remembers getting back from school and seeing a puppy, busy chewing a ball and breaking it. He also recalls seeing Grace for the first time, a beautiful girl who captured his heart. He observes that his love and Patricia's fear grew simultaneously. He obsesses about the car seats, but as much as he accuses Patricia and feels she is to blame, he also did nothing about the incident. He left the farm, married, had children. If Richard is indeed responsible for Grace's death, well then surely both Patricia and Looksmart are complicit too. Looksmart reflects on his adult life and marriage. This is important to him. He has a piece missing, and he has peace missing. Peace, P-I-E-C-E, and peace, P-E-A-C-E. No one can fill this void in his life. Do you think that Looksmart's decision to return to Dwaleni and confront Patricia is an attempt to find a peace or some peace? And is it a reasonable expectation? The last time in part 3, we hear from Patricia. Beauty stumbles into the house, wet and mud-covered. Patricia asks her to tell her the story of that night. Beauty tries to evade the question, but Patricia insists. She knows that this is a result of Looksmart's visit, and she resents it. He half tells, half prompts her story, which confirms his version. And Beauty adds that she couldn't tell the police what happened as she was young and scared, especially scared of Richard. Once again, follow in your books from page 146 as you listen to the audio recording of Patricia's point of view.
Patricia, page 146. Beauty arrives covered in mud. Usually she would have removed her shoes at the kitchen door, wiped away the muck with a cloth, and gone barefoot or changed her shoes. But this time she seems to have forgotten. Missus, I've looked everywhere and I can't find Ubas. Otherwise the mud is intended as a statement. This is the state I'm in, or we are in, and this is what we have been reduced to. Beauty, I wanted to ask you, Missus, I wanted to ask you more about your sister, Grace. Yebo, Missus? I would like you to tell me more about the day she died. What you saw at the dairy, and this time I would like the truth. The word truth seems to surprise Beauty. Perhaps such a thing has never been asked of her before. Patricia watches her adjusting herself to the word, to the unusual flavor of it. She seems to be preparing herself for it. squaring up to it, like one of those gymnasts that you see on the television, about to twist themselves improbably through space. Yebo, Mrs. You have nothing to be afraid of. Yebo, Mrs. She says this, as though Patricia has no idea of what she's talking about. There is what you know, Mrs., the dog, that it killed her. Yes, but what don't I know? Beauty switches her gaze away from the vistas. Such a question might open up, and instead feigns a general impotence. Mrs.? Before the attack, Patricia says, at the dairy, what exactly did you see? A scene seems to flicker before her eyes, back and forth, and back again. But Beauty does not appear to like what she sees. Or perhaps she does not like what it might lead to. She looks frightened in a way Patricia has never seen in her before. Luto, Mrs. Then why do you look so afraid? Looksmart approaches her without a sound. With a new voice he speaks, full of what sounds like feigned compassion. Ungasabi, Beauty, seyalazi, iqiniso. She has a quick flash at him. Something like annoyance, suggesting that nothing he can say will make any difference either way. He is not the thing to be afraid of. The thing to be afraid of that she carries inside her. You do not know the truth, she tells him. Beauty, you must not be afraid. Mrs., but I can't say it. Even Patricia can see that this is her way of telling them that she might be able to say it, but only with the right prompting. My husband is a sick man now, Patricia says. If you're the only one who saw the whole of what happened and can still remember, well, then you have to speak. Beauty is looking at the thing ahead of her from different angles, perhaps wondering if there's any way to circumvent it. But she can't get around it. It is coming towards them ineluctably, like a sneeze or a death. I will not blame you, Patricia adds. I can promise you that. When the words finally come, they come from a resigned and inevitable place. The story she's about to tell sounds familiar to her, as if she's played it 1,000 times inside her head. But even as she hears the words, Patricia knows they are only making a gesture in one general direction, a row of miniature arrows, no more effectual than chopsticks, making a stab at a city's walls. I was finishing with the cows, letting them out into the... I was about to do the cleaning with a hosepipe and I was turning the tap when the noise It is coming from the storage room. So I open the door a little bit, very soft, so I can see, and then I see. What do you see, Beauty? Look smart, asks this, trying to hold her there with his voice, almost caressing her, like a hypnotist. But she's far away, wrapped deep inside herself, hardly daring to breathe. They are on the floor, aren't they? Look Smart says. Yes. His hand is over her mouth. She sees me and... Kubeka, Beauty. But for a moment, she can't seem to carry on. Did she get away from him then? Patricia says. Yeah, Mrs. And the dog? Patricia continues. Did my husband unchain the dog? Oh, Mrs. Beauty starts to breathe more rapidly, panting like a dog, like the dog they are talking about. But it reminds Patricia more of a woman trying to give birth. Tell us, Beauty. He undid the chain, and the dog running. Look Smart is standing now, looking over their heads, seeing the scene as he imagines it, expectant, entranced, almost triumphant. Yes, he says. He waits to see the dog catch her, doesn't he? He waits to make sure. Isn't that it, Beauty? Beauty doesn't look at him. She barely hesitates. But the scene, or so it seems to Patricia, has already started to fade away inside her, like the light in the eye of a dying animal. That, she says, is it. Look Smart moves away, shrugging his shoulder as if wanting to remove his jacket. It's a gesture of relief or of release. Perhaps he now imagines he will be free from his burden. But he will never be free. All he has achieved is to hand some of his burden across to Patricia. When the police came to question everyone, why did you say nothing? Patricia says, oh, I was young and no one ever looked at me and I was afraid of him. Yes, I see. Patricia says, seeing it all with a strange and estranging clarity. And Richard, does he even know what you saw? No one knows what I saw. Beauty seems to say this with the knowledge that this statement for the first time is no longer true. Two others know now what she saw. What she saw no longer belongs to her. It will become a part of the general story that is used to define her sister. Will you say this to Ubas, Mrs.? Patricia can see that even today the poor woman is afraid of him. Tell me, Beauty, she says. Did he ever try anything with you? Ah, Mrs. Beauty threw this idea away with a quiet ferocity. Grace, she was the last one from the farm. The two women almost seemed to have forgotten about Look Smart. Patricia gazes at the small, proud spirit in front of her, wondering at the enigma of her. She had come to think of Beauty as a friend, and she thought she knew everything there was to know about her. But of course, that was only vanity or laziness or wishful thinking. Don't worry, Beauty, she says, feeling as she says it that she has said it before and will no doubt say it again. We are finished talking about this now. Ngiyabonga, Mrs. But still Beauty looks skeptical. And what about Ubas? What about him? Do you still want him?
Patricia interrogates Beauty, but memory is unreliable. Each of the witnesses, Look Smart, Patricia, and Beauty, have a different account of Grace's death. We can't hear Richard's account, as his brain has been addled by his increasing dementia. Again, the diction here is uncompromising, brutal even, as Beauty thinks back to the rape. In the fifth quote, we acknowledge that Patricia is vain, lazy, and certainly guilty of wishful thinking if she considers Beauty her friend. Their relationship is complicated. I'm not sure that one could use the word friendship to describe it. In the last line of Part 3, or Act 3, Beauty asks Patricia a question. Do you still want him? It's both a practical and a philosophical question. Does Patricia want Richard to return to the farmhouse after wandering off in his confused state? Or does Patricia want to stay with him, stay in the marriage? You'll notice that Patricia does not answer the question. Read these pages in your study guide and then answer the questions that start on page 116. These questions ask us to consider the nature of the relationships on the farm, especially the relationship between Patricia and the other residents, the workers. Question 3 has a direct bearing on the title of the novel. He thinks about starting over, rebuilding his life. The argument with Look Smart is the first conversation that Patricia has had with someone in a long time, a real conversation about a topic that matters. The double thing is a description of the attack on Grace. Think what it symbolizes and what was destroyed for Look Smart. Beauty's surprise is linked to her perception of her role in the Wiley household, the master or mistress-servant relationship. Pause the video as you write down your answers to these questions. And when you're ready, you can play the rest of the video and check how your answers compare to the suggested answers given. The birth of Look Smart was an opportunity for the residents of Dwaleni to join forces for a common purpose, but it was an opportunity lost. The entrenched prejudices could not be resolved or challenged by this infant. Patricia does not come out of this well. She's not a truly compassionate or empathetic employer. She looks out for the welfare of her workers because she has to. It's expected of her, not because she wants to. This passage is very, very important. I advise you to mark it or highlight it in your novel. The image of houses in various stages of being built is linked to the title. What would Richard do if he could start over? How would he build his dream house, his dream life? Do you think he regrets his actions? How much does he even remember? I really grapple with this character. I can find no redeeming feature in him at all. I do have a little bit of sympathy for Patricia. She has been stunted by her loveless marriage, her humiliation caused by her husband's hubris. With Looksmart, she feels that she has some purpose as she tries to put together the fragments of those memories, those truths of the day that Grace was killed. I get the idea that this conversation, this confrontation, is a relief to both of them. The dog on Grace, the double creature, it's such a powerful image. It is the moment that Looksmart's world came crashing down on him. On one level, it was the trauma of losing Grace in the most bloody and violent manner possible. On another level, it was the trauma of confronting the realities of the unequal lives on the farm, realizing for the first time his position, Grace's position, as inferior beings in the eyes of the woman he regarded as a mother. It was the day that fear trumped love, the day that Chloe, the dog, revealed the worthlessness of black lives. Looksmart could never be the same again. His innocence, his naivete has been destroyed. Beauty has grown up in a life of service. She knows her place, as it were. Her job is to soothe and pacify her mistress. And Beauty is surprised that she's being asked to tell the truth. The end of part 3. It's a grim story. I'd forgive you if you ask, why do we have to study such dark and depressing literature? Why indeed? Try to make sense of what you have read by updating your notes using these headings. Feel free to contact me should you have any queries. You can reach me on any of these platforms using Mrs. M Teaches English in your search. In the next lesson, we'll begin with part 4 of the novel. Goodbye, everyone.